You know that feeling when you finally save up a few $1,000s and you feel like you've actually accomplished something, right? Like you're being responsible, you're doing the adult thing, you're protecting yourself financially. So you take that money and you put it in your bank account. Maybe you're lucky enough to find one of those high-yield savings accounts that advertises 4 or 5% interest, and you think to yourself, okay, I'm making money on my money now. I'm crushing it. You feel like you finally understand how wealth works. You've got your emergency fund sitting safely in the bank. You're not going to blow it on stupid stuff. You're being smart with your money, which is more than most people can say. Well, I have some news for you that might not be what you want to hear. That money sitting in your bank account right now is actually costing you a fortune, and you probably have no idea it's happening. Not in some dramatic way where the bank is stealing from you. That's not what this is about. But in a slow, invisible, completely legal way, your money is being quietly destroyed, and the system is actually designed that way. My name is Alex, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, about where it goes, and specifically about all the ways people unwittingly sabotage their own financial future without even realizing it's happening. If you're someone who wants to actually understand what's really happening to your savings and maybe even do something about it, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps you see your money differently. Before we dive into the math that's going to make you absolutely furious at your bank, let me paint you a picture of what most people do with their savings. They work hard, they earn their paycheck, they put away whatever they can manage, usually not that much, and then they feel good about themselves because that money is safe. It's in a bank. It's insured by the government. What could possibly go wrong, right? They tell themselves they're being fiscally responsible. They're doing what their parents told them to do. They're following the advice they heard from financial advisors and personal finance books. Everyone says the same thing. Get your emergency fund into a savings account. Keep your money safe. Don't be reckless. And they believe it. They follow the advice faithfully. But here's the thing that nobody really talks about. Your money doesn't need to be destroyed for you to lose it. In fact, you can have every single dollar sitting safely in your account and still end up significantly poorer in real terms. How is that possible, you ask? It's called inflation, and it's probably one of the most underrated financial disasters that happens to regular people. And almost nobody talks about it in the context of savings because it's uncomfortable and it challenges the conventional wisdom we've all been taught. The average inflation rate over the past several decades has been around 3% per year. Sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's lower, but 3% is a reasonable baseline. Now, 3% might not sound like much. Like, that seems manageable, that seems small, that doesn't sound catastrophic. But let me show you what 3% actually means for your actual purchasing power. Imagine you have $10,000 sitting in a savings account right now. You feel good about this. You're making a tiny bit of interest. Maybe you're earning half of 1% or 1% if you're with one of the slightly better banks. Let's say you get 1%. You're making $100 per year on that $10,000. Nice, right? You're keeping your money safe and earning something. Maybe you check your account balance every month and feel proud of how it's growing. Except here's what's actually happening underneath the surface. If inflation is running at 3% per year, that means everything you can buy with your money is going up 3%. Your groceries cost 3% more. Your rent or mortgage would cost 3% more. Gas costs 3% more. Your healthcare costs 3% more. Insurance goes up. Car maintenance goes up. Literally everything costs 3% more, but your money is only earning 1%. You're actually losing ground. You're falling behind at a rate of about 2% per year. That might not sound dramatic when you say it out loud, but compound that over time and it gets ugly really fast. This is where most people stop thinking about the math because it gets depressing. Over 10 years, that difference between 1% earnings and 3% inflation compounds into you losing about 18% of your purchasing power on that $10,000. So $10,000 sitting in a low-yield savings account for 10 years is actually only worth about $8,200 in real terms. You haven't lost the money physically. It's still there. You can still log into your account and see $10,000 sitting in your account, but it can buy less stuff. Way less stuff. That's the hidden cost nobody talks about. It's not that your account balance went down. It's that your account balance can't buy as much as it used to. It's the perfect crime of modern finance, really. Nobody's taking your money. You're not getting robbed. But you're getting slowly, systematically made poorer without your permission and without most people even realizing it's happening. And here's what makes this even worse. I haven't even mentioned opportunity cost yet. Opportunity cost is this concept that whenever you choose one thing, you're giving up the opportunity to do something else. So when you put money in a low-yield savings account, you're not just losing purchasing power to inflation. You're also giving up the chance to earn what that money could have made if you'd invested it differently. You're making a choice that costs you money in the future, and most people don't even realize they're making the choice. Let me show you what I mean. Let's go back to that $10,000. If you put it in a savings account earning 1%, after 10 years, you have $10,000 and about $1,000 in interest. After inflation eats away at it, you've got something like $8,200 in purchasing power. Not great. But what if instead of doing that, you took that same $10,000 and you invested it in a simple index fund that tracked the stock market? The historical average return of the stock market is around 10% annually. Now, past performance doesn't guarantee future results. I know, but 10% is actually conservative compared to what the market has done over decades. It's the kind of return you'd get if you just bought a total market index fund and forgot about it for 10 years. With 10% annual returns, that $10,000 turns into $25,000 after 10 years. Even after inflation reduces the real value, you're looking at something closer to $20,000 in purchasing power. That's more than double what you would have had in a savings account. That's literally more than 100% additional purchasing power from the exact same starting amount of money. And the crazy part, you didn't have to do anything special. You didn't have to work harder. You didn't have to start a business. You didn't have to pick stocks or become an expert in finance. You didn't have to do anything except put your money somewhere it could actually work for you, instead of somewhere it would slowly erode away while a bank makes money off the difference. This is the opportunity cost that most people never calculate. They're so focused on the safety of having money in a bank that they never stop to think about what that safety is actually costing them. And it's costing them a fortune. It's costing them tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. Let me give you another angle on this because I think this one might hit even harder. Most financial advice tells you to keep 3 to 6 months of living expenses in an emergency fund. Let's say your monthly expenses are $3,000. That means you should have between $9,000 and $18,000 sitting in a savings account for emergencies. Now, that's reasonable advice in terms of having actual money available when you need it. You absolutely need that safety net. Nobody's going to argue that. But here's what people don't calculate. If you have $15,000 sitting in a savings account earning 1% interest for 20 years while inflation averages 3%, you've lost roughly $8,000 in purchasing power. $8,000. That's not a small number. That's enough to buy a car, or fund a semester of college, or cover a serious medical procedure. That emergency fund is protecting you from actual emergencies while slowly destroying your long-term wealth because it's sitting somewhere. It's not earning enough to keep pace with inflation. And this is where the psychology gets really interesting. People know they should have emergency savings. They feel like they're being smart and responsible by having that money in a bank. They sleep better at night knowing it's there. But if that emergency money is eroding in value every single year, are they actually being smart? Or are they being smart about one thing while being incredibly stupid about another? The real answer is probably somewhere in the middle. You do need accessible money for emergencies. That part is non-negotiable. But you probably don't need the entire emergency fund sitting in a near zero interest savings account earning nothing while inflation eats away at it. You could keep maybe 1 month of expenses in a high yield savings account for actual emergencies, and the rest could be invested somewhere that actually keeps pace with inflation and gives you a chance to build real wealth. But instead, most people keep their entire emergency fund in a boring savings account because they've been told that's what responsible people do. And technically they have been told that. But that advice was probably given before interest rates completely collapsed and before inflation became a real threat again. The advice is outdated, but people keep following it anyway because they haven't questioned whether the conventional wisdom still applies in the current environment. The banking system relies on this behavior, by the way. Banks want your money sitting in their accounts earning almost nothing. Do you know why? Because banks take your money, they pay you maybe 0.5% interest, and then they lend that money out at 5, 6, sometimes 7% interest. The difference between what they pay you and what they earn on lending your money out is pure profit for them. It's called the spread, and it's one of the most reliable money-making machines in the entire financial system. Every dollar sitting in a bank account is a dollar the bank can use to make money while paying you almost nothing for the privilege of using your savings. It's brilliant from a business perspective. It's terrible from your perspective. When you deposit money in a bank, you're essentially making a low-interest loan to the bank, and they turn around and make substantially higher interest loans to other people. You're the middleman, and you're getting the worst end of the deal. The bank is earning 4 to 6% on your money while paying you close to 0%. And banks have been doing this for hundreds of years. It's their entire business model. They're not going to change it because it's too profitable, which means if you keep your money in a bank, you're essentially participating in a system designed to extract value from you while enriching the financial institutions. Here's something that really gets me about all of this. People talk about being worried about the stock market. They talk about how risky it is to invest in stocks. They worry about market crashes and volatility and all of these scary things. Meanwhile, they're keeping money in a savings account that is absolutely guaranteed to lose purchasing power over time. There's no maybe about it. It's not a risk. It's a certainty. Over any period longer than a few years, inflation will eat away at your savings account balance. That's not a guess. That's not a prediction. That's just how math works when you're earning less interest than the rate of inflation. But somehow people perceive the savings account as safe and the stock market as risky. It's backwards. The savings account is the guaranteed loss of purchasing power. The stock market is the only place where most regular people have a real chance of beating inflation and actually building wealth. Now, I want to be really clear about something. I'm not saying you should take your emergency fund and throw it all into individual tech stocks or anything crazy like that. I'm also not saying you should never keep money in a savings account. What I'm saying is that you should have a conscious strategy about which money goes where based on what you're actually trying to accomplish. Money you're going to need in the next 3 to 12 months? Sure, keep that in a high-yield savings account. You want it to be accessible and stable. Money you won't need for 5, 10, 20 years or more, that should be invested. That's the money that needs to be fighting against inflation and actually growing in real terms. But here's where most people mess this up. They don't have a timeline for their money. They just have money sitting around in their savings account because they feel like they should be saving. But they haven't thought about when they're actually going to need it. So everything sits in the savings account, and everything slowly erodes away. Let me give you a concrete example of what this actually costs over a lifetime. Imagine someone who saves an extra $1,000 every single year for 40 years. That's $30,500 total saved over 4 decades. Now let's say they put that money in a savings account earning 1% per year, while inflation averages 3% per year. After 40 years, they've contributed $35,000, but due to the erosion of purchasing power, that money is only worth about $18,000 in today's money. They've effectively lost about half the value of their savings. But what if that same person had invested that $1,000 every year in a simple index fund earning 8% annually after accounting for inflation? After 40 years, they would have about $420,000. $420,000 versus $18,000. That's the difference between comfortable retirement and barely scraping by. That's the difference between having financial freedom and working until you die. And the only difference is where they put their money. The same person working the same job, earning the same income, contributing the same amount. The only difference is that in one scenario, they're keeping their money in a savings account, and in the other scenario, they're investing it. Let me also address something that I know people are going to say. The stock market is risky. It goes down sometimes. There are crashes and recessions and bear markets. All of that is true. But here's what people often miss about risk. Keeping your money in a savings account and losing purchasing power to inflation is also risky. It's just a different kind of risk. It's a guaranteed slow motion risk instead of a dramatic crash risk. And over any reasonable long-term time horizon, the guaranteed slow motion risk of inflation is almost always worse than the occasional volatility of the stock market. History shows this pretty clearly. Even through multiple bear markets, multiple recessions, and actual market crashes, the stock market has always eventually recovered and set new all-time highs. Money sitting in a savings account and losing purchasing power never recovers. It just keeps losing value. So which is actually the riskier choice? The one with occasional ups and downs but overall positive growth trajectory, or the one with a guaranteed negative real return? I think the answer is pretty obvious once you actually think about it. But here's why people still don't do it. There's something psychologically comforting about having money in a bank account. You can see it. You can access it. You can check the balance online and know exactly how much is there. It feels safe. Investing money feels abstract and scary because the value fluctuates and you can't touch it as easily. But this is where emotions get in the way of good financial decisions. Your emotions are wrong about what's safe. A savings account feels safe, but is actually slowly destroying your wealth. Investing in a diversified portfolio feels scary, but is actually the path to building real wealth and financial security. Once you understand this, everything changes. You start thinking differently about where your money goes. You realize that the safety of a savings account is an illusion. It's not actually protecting your wealth. It's just making it harder to watch the damage happen. Real safety comes from building wealth through investing so that you have enough money to handle whatever life throws at you. Real safety doesn't come from being able to see your money sitting in a bank account looking like it's not going anywhere. It comes from having enough wealth built up that you can absorb shocks and still be fine. Here's another thing that really bothers me about all of this. Young people especially get really bad advice about keeping money in savings accounts. Parents tell their kids to save money and not take risks. Financial advisors recommend keeping your emergency fund in cash. Banks run commercials talking about the security and safety of keeping your money with them. And young people listen to all of this advice and they start their financial lives by putting their money in savings accounts. If you start this habit at 25 and you keep most of your money in low-yield savings accounts for the next 40 years until retirement, you've basically guaranteed yourself a mediocre financial outcome. You've optimized for safety in a way that actually makes you less safe because you failed to build real wealth. Meanwhile, someone who might take a bit more risk with their money, who invests in index funds, who understands the power of compound interest, ends up with substantially more wealth and is actually in a much better position financially. The person taking more risk ended up safer. The person taking less risk ended up in danger. It's completely backwards from how most people think about it. And it all comes down to where they decided to keep their money. I know what you're thinking right now. Okay, so I should move all my money out of savings accounts and into investments, right? And the answer is no, that's not what I'm saying. That would be equally wrong. What I'm saying is that you should be strategic about it. You should have a plan. You should know which money is for emergencies and which money is for long-term wealth building. The emergency money can stay in a high-yield savings account, but that should be limited to maybe 3 to 6 months of actual expenses, not your entire savings. Everything beyond that should be invested. If you're young, if you have a job, if you have decades before you retire, almost all of your money should be invested because you have time for it to weather market volatility and actually build real wealth. The longer your time horizon, the less risky the stock market actually is. It only becomes risky if you need the money in the short term and you're forced to sell during a downturn. But if you don't need the money for 5, 10, 20 years, short-term volatility becomes irrelevant. What matters is long-term growth trajectory, and historically the stock market has always won that game over any long enough time period. The hidden cost of keeping cash in banks is that you're betting against your own future. You're choosing comfort and psychological safety over actual wealth building. And at some point, usually around retirement, you realize what you've done. You look at your savings and you realize it's not enough. You realize you've been left behind by inflation. You realize you made a choice that felt safe at the time but wasn't actually safe at all. The really tragic part is that for most people, this realization comes too late to fix. If you're 55 years old and you realize you should have been investing all your money instead of keeping it in a savings account, it's too late to spend 30 years investing and let compound interest work its magic. You're stuck with whatever you managed to accumulate. You're stuck with a retirement that's going to be much less comfortable than it could have been. But if you're young and you're watching this, you still have time. You still have the most valuable asset in the entire wealth building equation, which is time. Time allows your money to compound. Time allows you to weather market volatility. Time allows you to build real wealth instead of slowly watching it erode away to inflation. Use that time wisely. Don't make the same mistake that so many people make. Don't let psychological comfort get in the way of actual wealth building. Because in the end, the hidden cost of keeping cash in banks isn't just about losing money to inflation. It's about losing the opportunity to build real wealth. It's about limiting your future freedom because you were too focused on short-term comfort. It's about setting yourself up for financial stress in retirement because you optimized for safety instead of actual financial security. Real security comes from having enough wealth that you can handle whatever life throws at you. And you're not going to build that wealth by keeping your money in a savings account earning 1% while inflation runs at 3%. You're going to build it by investing in things that actually have a chance to beat inflation and create real growth. So before you think about where to put that next $1,000 you managed to save, think about what that money is actually for. Think about when you'll need it. Think about what your actual financial goals are. And then make an intentional decision about where that money should go. That decision is probably going to determine a significant portion of your financial outcome over the next 30 or 40 years. Don't take it lightly. Don't just do what feels comfortable or what everyone else is doing. Do what actually makes sense based on your specific situation and your actual financial goals. Because in the end, that's the real hidden cost of keeping cash in banks. It's not some complicated math or obscure financial principle. It's just the fact that you've chosen comfort over wealth, and that choice compounds over time into a substantially less wealthy retirement. So choose differently.